My name is Luella Murphy, and I started life, I don't know, I guess in Nebraska. That's where I was born. And we traveled. I never went to school 2 years in the same place until we wound up in Utah. And I guess my father traveled because things kept happening to him and he had to travel. We wound up in Utah and stayed there. That was the longest period of time. I guess it was 4 or 5 years that I was there before I had to get away from home. So there's no way for a 14-year-old to get away from home and get away with it except to get married. And his father and my father were going to come after us with shotguns, but they went out and got drunk together instead and forgot about that. So we were married. We went to Idaho and lied about our ages, of course. And then that was at the beginning of World War II. And he had enlisted in the Merchant Marine, and he was sent to New York for training. So I got on a Greyhound and followed him to New York. And New York was very exciting. It was really great. What was New York like during that period? It seemed so full of life, coming from the West, and there was something always happening in New York. I remember exploring through Bloomingdale's and Macy's, and I worked for a company called Psychological Testing Corporation, which we scored the tests for nurses. I remember that much. And he came home on weekends. He was at the Merchant Marine Academy and came home on weekends. So during the week, I'd go to work and I'd come home and I'd run around New York by myself. And in those days, it was safe, I guess. And nothing ever happened to me anyway. It was really, really exciting.
You were here throughout the entire war?
No. No, I was only here for like 7.5 months. It seems much longer because it's a big portion of memories for me. But it was only 7.5 months because I was pregnant. And I went home to have my daughter, took the Greyhound home. And after my daughter was born, he came home on leave, and then he was sent to Seattle, and from there he went overseas. And I stayed home and worked, and eventually had a boy. And then he came home for good, and things fell apart very rapidly. And again, I had to get away from there, so I went to Nevada, got a job, and I heard all these fabulous stories about the money you could make. I mean, money's just pouring out. You could make all kinds of money. You didn't have to have any special training or anything special at all. The only thing is you had to be 21 to do anything in Nevada. And so I got a hospital birth certificate and changed the date and made myself 2 years older and went to Nevada. Got a job in Harold's Club as a 21 dealer. And there I found a very different way of life than, again, another total different way of life. It was 24 hours around the clock, nothing ever stopped. And the people were very glamorous and beautiful, and I fit in right away. I learned how to fit in no matter where I went. And these people taught me how to drink. I mean, actually my first drink was a celebration of my 19th birthday. It was a birthday party they gave me. And that's the first time that I had actually picked up a drink. They had this wonderful, wonderful punch, which changed my life, made me feel good. And from then on, I learned how to drink, and for effect, for looks. It was always for show. And I stayed in Nevada for a year until I got into some kind of trouble there, and I moved to California. I was in San Bernardino for a year until I got into some kind of trouble there. The big thing I remember about San Bernardino is a place called The Cave. I was a waitress, and we wore these costumes like I Dream of Jeannie, you know, the pants and the vest. I remember the costume. I don't remember anything about the place, the work, but I remember the costume. And the name of the place was The Cave. And I moved around the country and took my kids with me for about 10 years. A lot of adventures, which, you know.
Like,
adventures, let's see. Well, at one point in Reno, I was running with a motorcycle gang. I always worked 2 jobs, and I always lived 2 lives. I worked in Harold's Club, and I hung out with these glamorous people, and I met interesting and, you know, and I fit in with them, but there was this cute guy who rode a motorcycle, and after I met him, I wound up running with the motorcycle as well, you know, on my off hours. I rode a Harley 45. We did hill climbs outside of Reno and drank beer. Now, I would never drink beer because that's what my father drank. I mean, that's one of the things he drank. And so up to that point, I'd never drank beer. But the motorcycle crowd drank beer, so I drank beer. And I drank the mixed drinks and the glamorous drinks with the other crowd.
So there's a certain class issue to it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I was a chameleon. I fit in wherever it was necessary for me to fit in. And that's pretty much, I would get into trouble. I'd go out drinking, and I was a blackout drinker. I didn't remember a lot of times what happened, but things would happen and I'd be in trouble, so I would move to another state. I'd pack up the kids in the middle of the night and catch a Greyhound or a train or whatever and go someplace else. And so I lived in, I think, 5 different states before I wound up in Buffalo I was up there for a couple of years. That was, I also got married a couple of times along the way. These things happen. Thank goodness, let's see, 2 of them divorced me. 2 of my husbands divorced me, and 2 of them died. The first one in an automobile accident, and the second one was shot outside a nightclub or whatever. I was in Buffalo for a couple of years.
Doing what? What were you doing? What were you doing in Buffalo?
I went there because someone told me that, I think it was a casino, that they had casinos. Or anyway, there was supposed to be good jobs there and lots of money. The mob, that was the rumor. I never met them, but I went there looking for them. And I wound up working in Buffalo. It's, again, Mayflower Donut Shop, as a matter of fact. That one I remember. Love donuts. And that's where I met my 3rd husband. And married him and came to New York City. And after a year or so, he divorced me, and again, I was at loose ends. I don't know, whenever I was in trouble, I always moved and I always got married. It was just a thing, a pattern.
And you were drinking?
Always, always drinking. It never, from the time I started to drink, it never occurred to me not to drink. I didn't have the remorse and the guilt and all of that stuff that I hear people talk about. I don't know if I ever had a conscience, really. I drank. And I didn't know anyone who didn't drink the way I did.
What about the kids during this period of time?
I hired people to take care of them. When I moved to a new place, I'd find an apartment, a place to live, and I would hire hopefully someone to live in and take care of the kids, because that way, always look for an elderly woman who needed, a home and a stipend, and they'd take care of everything. And then and like I said, I almost always had 2 jobs. I would work all day, and everybody thought, how hard I worked. It was really important to me what people thought of me, always.